Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I would talk about the second book in my idiosyncratic personal book club for the summer. I'm in Scotland still. I'll be back home soon, tomorrow I think. So I thought I'd record one here. The second book is Wild Mind by Natalie Goldberg, which I think I've read 4 times. The first time was in spring 1998, and I've read her since the early 90s when I first picked up Writing Down the Bones, probably during my MA in creative writing. It was one of the books that other students had read on other courses. I hadn't heard of her until that point. She's a Zen teacher and a teacher of writing, and she's written, 10 or 12 books. And I've read, I think, everything, apart from the book on haiku, which I haven't got to yet. She's somebody I find extremely useful in helping me to write, but more than that, to put myself in the right mind to write. I love the way that she's so honest and telling about her own life, especially in this one, in Wild Mind. I remember the big jump from the first book. The first book is wonderful, and it teaches you all about writing practice and how you sit still but keep your hand moving, as she says, and you write any old junk, and then throw those things out. It's all about warming up to write and sinking down into your deepest preoccupations to find out what it is you really do want to write about. Stuff that I've taken very seriously and used in my own practice for years and years. In this book, in Wild Mind, she becomes more forthcoming about her own life. She talks about struggling with her novel that she's writing and learning about things like plot only after she's written a 500-page novel. She talks about coming out to her parents when she decides she's going to be a lesbian in her 40s and hitting the bars of Europe. And she tells us stories about that. And she talks about her friendships and the conversations she has with people, and where she lives in Mexico. And we get a sense of this world around her, a very artistic world, a very healing world, I think. And she talks about learning to run as well, and how she applies what she learns from all these different things she does, including painting, we find out in a later book, to writing practice, that everything connects. Something I've always believed in as well. So it's taken me a couple of weeks to read this very slowly, very slowly. They're short chapters, they're pithy, almost kind of fable-like in places, slightly gnomic, I guess, kind of Zen parable-ish in the way she tells these tales. And then she often gives us exercises to have a go at the ends of chapters. Not every chapter, just sometimes she gives us a kind of writing prompt. I'm quite tempted to buy the book of cards that she's brought out that are like writing prompts, a kind of tarot deck of writing prompts. I might make my own, actually. That would be a fun thing to do. She has a book coming out August. It's not quite next month yet, which I've now got on pre-order, which I believe is to do with lockdown and how she hit some kind of writing brick wall during lockdown. I know lots and lots of writers who found it really hard during that time. I did write. It took me a while to work up to it. I had to make all sorts of other projects first to keep myself occupied and to keep panic at bay. We have to remember that a lot of the effort about COVID in terms of getting through it and through lockdown was about not panicking. And for me, writing did help that. I wrote A Wedding for the Biscuit Factory Girls, my 3rd Elsie Mason book, and that really helped in that summer of 2020. But I believe that from the blurb of her next book, Natalie Goldberg found that difficult and questioned what she was doing. I think this is what the gist of the book is. I do remember sometime around the spring, summer of 2020, she was involved in a YouTube tutorial. I don't know how many she did, but there was one that her publisher held. I think it was a publisher, and it was free. And it was just her doing a Zoom call with somebody, a young fella, and he interviewed her, and then there was some writing exercises, which was basically her saying, you know, go off and write. And she wrote at the desk, and we all wrote. I took part in that. There must have been thousands of us, and it felt great to be part of a class during that that strange time. I did a few of those kinds of things. I saw Roger McGough give a reading from his living room in Liverpool, and a couple of other things. I was really pleased that people were putting these things on. At the same time, I would give a reading from my study on Facebook Live every Friday night for about 12 weeks during the first lockdown. I remember doing that. And it really did make you feel connected with people. But doing a workshop where the screen just showed somebody writing as she wrote her own stuff was really nice. I always believed in that when I taught creative writing a lot, that when I set exercises, I would do them as well. So we were all in the same place making these things. I loved the collaborative workshops as well. The best of which ever, I think, was probably in 2018 when I taught at Moniac Moor in Scotland and up near Inverness. And between us, the whole group constructed a science fiction epic. And we all had different characters we were responsible for on this giant spaceship. And a whole epic adventure that unspooled over 2 or 3 workshops. I should do more of that. I haven't taught for quite a while, actually. Anyway, she puts me in the mind for teaching, and because she's a teacher down to her bones, and everything she talks about relates back to teaching, how you might help people. And I do have that impulse. I guess it's why I'm doing these videos. I'm turning the soil over, the soil of my thinking and reading and writing. And as you turn it over, you want to tell people about what you've found. I love the stuff at the end of this that I'd forgotten about being lazy, how one of the writer's great tools is laziness, and that you could lie for a whole day and just let the world happen to you. And by the end of it, you'd be dying to write because your mind would have been going everywhere. And I do identify with that, but it's so hard to sit still or to actually be lazy without wanting to do lots of stuff or without feeling guilty. She never mentions the word guilt, but that would be there, I think. But I do take the point. I do remember Michelle Roberts saying years and years ago at UEA, when she came to be one of our professors and work with me on the MA, we were talking about these very full timetables that everybody had. We used to fill our timetables. It was the era of everybody feeling they had to justify every bit of every day, all the work they did. And public institutions suffered from this. It was under the kind of Blair Brown years where nobody was trusted to just get on with the thing they were expert in. They had to justify everything, and there were metrics and all kinds of ways of measuring how useful somebody was. And the world has got worse with that, I think. But there was a turning point where people were, around about the millennium, when they stopped trusting experts to be expert. And I do remember Michelle saying, but where in all of this is the time for writers to daydream? And she talked about how important that was. In lots of ways, she's an old hippie. And of course, Natalie Goldberg is an old hippie as well. And at heart, I guess, I am too. And you do have to have space for daydreaming. It's no use putting the kind of language and philosophy of things like business onto the arts. And that's what they started doing around about that time. I guess it was always there, but it really came in force in the early 2000s. that we all had to run around and look businesslike and be useful. It's not the best way of creating artistic work in any form. This coffee is instant, which I don't usually have, but it's this kind of instant cappuccino, and it's like the frothiest coffee ever. It's quite addictive. Anyway, yeah, so I take her point about being lazy, and it's a good point to take now when I'm going to take some time off, although I'm reading like mad and making notes like mad, of course. I was going to say something else about Natalie Goldberg, don't know. It makes me want to read all the others again, which probably I shouldn't. I should move on to other people. But she's the perfect figure for me to be reading this summer as part of my my own private, my idiosyncratic book club, in which I don't read the shiny new things that everybody's hankering after. I looked along my shelves and saw what I'd been reading in summers past and came up with 6 of them. And this one, I do remember reading it in at least 2 other summers. 1998, it was when I'd been at UEA for over a year, and I was worked like mad. I was on the point of burnout by 1998. That didn't happen for a little while after that, but they worked me into the ground. And I do remember the Natalie Goldberg book, this one, being very useful in terms of me stopping myself and thinking, hang on, you have to look after yourself as well. You can't just be exploited by the place you work, and you just can't be exploited by your own tendency to overwork in order to make you feel like you're doing something. I think it's Charles Bukowski who said about the time a writer spends not writing is just as valuable. It's when all the fermenting goes on. Anyway, I'm going to go. I hope this microphone has picked up my voice okay. I will stop there, and I'll see you again soon in the next episode. Goodbye.